I send my greetings and salutations from the southern tip of Africa in South Africa, Johannesburg. I would like to first and foremost thank my host, the organizers of Digital Around the World 2021, such an incredible event and such an incredible lineup of speakers as well. My focus today will be the application of blockchain in the Africa continent. Just quick brief on myself. My name is Kubyane. I am the co-founder and the COO of Coronet Blockchain, a B2B2C marketplace that provide blockchain vetted products to African salons, distributors, and retailers from global manufacturers at lower cost, sourcing costs rather. We use the blockchain technology to achieve the quality of product by securely tracking the products from source to consumer. Because it's a supply chain product, it's applicable to other supply chains as well. As I have communicated before, my focus today will be blockchain applications in African continent. And just to set the tone on what we're going to be talking about and to demonstrate the state of business in Africa, we're going to look at two industries today, which is the food supply chain and the fashion or textile industry. Just quick numbers, over 60% of Africans, they work within the food supply chain, whether as farmers or they work within the mainstream retailing of food, making the food supply chain to be actually the largest employer in Africa, seconded by the textile industry, with about 450,000 Africans working within cotton, just the growing and the selling of cotton alone, not the entire value chain. But in most developing countries, the textile industry is a second largest employer. And the last number we're going to be looking at is the 80% of employment in Africa. They are actually within the informal sector, making the informal sector to be the main source of employment, and it carries the economy is a backbone of the economy. We'll touch later on what makes the industry informal and why it is not a good idea, and how the blockchain technology can be used as a tool to accelerate the industries and create sustainabilities, especially within these small and medium businesses and the industries I've spoken about, the food supply chain and the textile industry. So blockchain technology, if it is a solution looking for answers, its ability to solve real pain points faced by African economies and African society, it will be determine its adoption and the impact that it will actually have within the South African continent, because it's not the technical features of blockchain, it is actually the business results, the business benefit, it is the technology, it is the internet of value. So if we can help us in Africa to distribute the value and solve real life problems, its adoption would really be accelerated, and the impact of the technology across Africa will be felt in that way. So the opportunities that we see within the blockchain, but first and foremost in looking into the problem itself that we are facing, one of the biggest problems that we have is the access to market. When you look at who really participate within the large ticket economies, large ticket ticket contracts, large ticket trade, it's big businesses because of the barriers to entry, whether it's the production, whether it's the growers, whether it's the retailers. Who ends up being more sustainable is that. And later on, I'm going to touch on how we can use the blockchain technology to ensure their participation and to help the small and medium business that makes the majority employment in Africa to participate better into the supply chain. And the second problem that we can look at, where we can use the blockchain technology to actually solve these kinds of problems, is the Africa Intertrade. It's a weird, because Africa is really designed to trade better with other countries that are within the first world than with itself. For example, Africa has over 33 million smallholder farmers, yet we imported over 35 billion annually of food from other first world countries, and we're going to be reaching about 100 billion by 2025, which is in just 4 years, unless we fix the supply chain and within the food industry and help these 33 million smallhold farmers to participate better within the economy. And the last part, obviously, of course, it's financial inclusion for farmers, for fashion designers, especially those that are on the downstream. When it comes to textile within the African context. So that's how we need to look at the current problem that we have at the moment, is that the informal sector is just, it's not good news for both business and the workers, because the informality of the businesses or the sector itself, it means that people that work within the sector do not have access on basic financial products that they actually need. It's difficult for continuity, it's difficult to access financing for business, to access housing financing for employment, because the key thing there is the proof of trade, the proof of employment, the sustainability of the businesses within the informal sector themselves, even though there's a lot of money that is changing hands and there's a lot of trade that is happening. If this left informal, it creates a very big gap and a big problem. So later on, we're going to look into how the blockchain technology can actually close the gap that exists. When it comes to Africa now, we have got 3 priorities that I'm going to be touching on. Earlier in 2020, we launched the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which is the largest in the world. Record time when it's signed and getting a buy-in across all countries. Very, very exciting. However, this is a potential. The agreement itself has set a number of priorities that we need to see by 2035. So I'm just going to touch on 3 of them today, which is priority number 1. They're not in that order: to reduce or cut the red tapes that actually exist as per ease of doing business. And by doing so, adding about 450 billion in potential income gains to the continent when we increase our inter-trade between the African countries. The second one is to actually remove tariffs from about up to 90% of goods, allowing the free access of commodities and goods and services across Africa. One of the recent events that happened was when Kenya had a problem of a massive potato rotting. It was making headlines, yet another countries in Africa were in shortage of potatoes. That goes to show you how disconnected Africa trade is and how uneasy it is to actually do business. So it is priority that first and foremost, we reduce the tariff. tariffs across these goods and make it easy for African countries to actually do business together. And the last priority in the top 3 that I've selected today is to bring 30 million people out of extreme poverty in Africa. And history has shown us that it's not aid that is going to do that, is trade that is actually going to achieve that. Starting with jobs that we actually have, we cannot have 80% of our jobs and 80% of business being informal and thinking about growing. So before we grow, we need to look at the ways on how we can make the current jobs to be sustainable using frontier technologies like blockchain. So that's what one of my focus is going to be at in order to solve these problems, because looking at how we can expand, how we can grow, we cannot take people out of poverty without creating sustainable employment, sustainable jobs, sustainable small business to start with. And blockchain technology is a very great tool that can actually be used to solve the problem that are caused by these businesses being informal. So the first leverage of blockchain is collaboration. It provides a very collaborative tool. For example, within the food supply chains, some of the small holder farmers, we have a system. I think Canada and other countries are actually practicing the same model that we practice. I know here in South Africa is one of the models in farming that we use is called co-ops, cooperatives. It's when about 10 families, they come together and then they join their fields. On average, a family would have about 2 acres of land. So totally, when they come together as like 10 families, they will create 20 acres of land. That with that being it, they make sure now that their production output, it increases, their employment or labor force, it increases, and it creates better jobs, and it creates a bigger output for whatever it is that they are actually farming. And there's a very great potential to make sure that happens. And they will have to register a co-op and all of that. So because the culture is already there, this is something that we can leverage using the blockchain technology, where a number of farmers can come together in that fashion. They don't even need to register a new company. They just need to use the blockchain technology to use it for recording of their processes of farming, of what goes into the farming food, in order, because those kinds of records are needed by mainstream business in order to retail their food, which has been a biggest barrier so far, to say, you know what, we can't buy directly for some of these farmers as mainstream business because we have no records of what went into the production or the growing of the food itself. There's just so much audit and blind spots rather that exist. So the blockchain technology can help in that regard to bring about that transparency of the supply chain and using it as a collaborative tool. Same thing with retailers. I remember beginning of last year, because of a lot of supply chain shock and a number of regulation requirements, a number of mainstream retailers in fashion have announced that they are willing to not increase their trade agreements or supplier agreements with certain countries that exist within Asia, because they want to start increasing their buying within the African continent. However, the challenges that exist in that, even though the opportunity is there, is that you have this small fashion designers and tailors that are just everywhere and they are not working together. And blockchain technology presents that tool of bringing them together to have that large scale or large ticket contract from a retail organization, because that's the key thing for any business. Every business needs to have a bigger contract. It is even a requirement, and the easiest way to actually get financing is easier to fund a business to deliver on an existing, bigger, sustainable, long-term kind of a contract than a hand-to-mouth. So this is very, very much needed. So even whether we're talking about the food supply chain or we are talking about textile, this can help small and medium businesses in Africa to collaborate better in order to deliver on these kinds of contract and these kinds of proposal requests from large retailers. The second part as well is that single trade, because that's a dream now, and that's a goal that we want to make sure that by 2025, it is easy for African continents to trade with one another. And that means now we have to leapfrog industries. We have to be super digital to make sure that the creation of blockchain-powered marketplace platforms to make sure that business A in South Africa can trade with business B in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Lesotho, in Angola, and other countries. It will be easy for these businesses to trade together. It will be easy for consumers to actually have access on products across the continent, because at the moment it's actually easy to buy stuff out there in the first world countries and just import them for personal consumption than it is to get them from a neighboring country. So the use of the blockchain technology to host and have this marketplace platform running in it will not only increase trade, but will also solve the product compliance, product quality compliance that is needed within the certain products that promise quality similar to what we are doing. And it will help the small businesses. Earlier, we spoke about collaboration to participate better within the supply chain, because currently Africa is always on the downstream of most of the supply chain. We have raw material, we export it, and it comes back for us to distribute it, consume it, and the money just doesn't stay in the country, does not empower small and medium businesses. So that's why the use of blockchain within this marketplace would actually help us to capture the market. Data deficiency is one of the biggest problems that we are actually facing, with data about consumers and consumer behavior. It's not sitting with us because we're not owning all this marketplace platform, making it difficult to plan for the future. So the use of blockchain in that regard is going to close that gap as well. And the last part, I'm going to be looking at it as the blockchain being a solution, is the digitization. I remember after COVID, South Africa availed about 50 billion in rents for small and medium businesses to actually get business COVID relief. And it was heartbreaking because small businesses could not participate on that. One, they have been trading, they've been creating employment, but the biggest problem was that they could not provide any verifiable proof of trade that they actually have. So that became a biggest problem, because these are businesses, they are creating employment, but they just cannot provide proof of trade. And the blockchain ledger can actually help the previously excluded or currently excluded businesses with a verifiable proof of trade that they actually need for sustainable businesses, for sustainable employment, because our record keeping is very poor, and that's what makes these businesses to be informal. Even though it should be very easy and quick to start businesses and not be a grind with a lot of red tapes, but Africa more than ever can no longer afford to remain informal. Informal businesses, we cannot. No matter how small the business is, whether you are selling tomatoes, you should be able to prove that today I sold 100 tomatoes. Whether you're running a chain of hotels, you should be able to say my 100 hotels, this is how they are doing at the moment. That is what's required for financial inclusion. and blockchain can actually help that. And in closing, blockchain implementation in Africa is going to help us to leapfrog a number of industries. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of financial inclusion, the unbanked, all of that is not always a bad idea or a bad thing now that we have the blockchain technology. Instead of going back to adding certain infrastructures, we can just leapfrog because there is no legacy systems that have been created that will make it difficult to say, you know what, as a country, as a continent, we have already invested billions in building these infrastructures. So for us to start digitizing, to innovate, is going to be a big problem. That's what we do not have in Africa. We actually have not invested as yet, and blockchain present that great opportunity for us to leapfrog industries without losing the investments that we actually have. I would like to again thank my hosts and the audiences for staying through this talk. My name is Pretty, and I would like to thank you again.